Well, welcome, J. Moon Fields, to the Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's awesome to be here.
I know we just had fun with your name like we've had before.
Yeah.
Why don't you just tell everybody where you got your name from so we'll get that in public record?
Right. I was just saying to him, well, actually, I don't know if you know this, my birth name was Jennifer. So Jay is the nickname.
Oh.
Jennifer Fields. And then 2 years ago, I got married to a guy with the last name Moon, and it was such a rad last name. But being in my mid 40s and having established a career and written books and courses with the last name Fields, I was like, oh, I should put his name in the middle. Plus, Moon Fields kind of sounded like a funny joke. And now I'm like, oh, I should have just taken his last name. But either way, Moon is my married name, and I stuck it in as my middle name just because I've never really. You said, "Do you really want to be a normal person now after all these years?" And I was like, "No, I've never really done anything
I like
the normal way."
Moonfields.
So,
I think Moonfields are cool. So we're on the way almost of starting the introduction of you. Can you briefly introduce yourself? Don't talk about all the business stuff. Just like where you're from originally, where you are now, family. I always ask people if there's something you've never told anybody else in the world and you want to reveal it now. Why not? So
well, I mean, I just told everybody my birth name, which most people don't know actually. But what's strange, I'll tell you this. I introduce myself as Jay all the time, and people often call me Jen, and they have no idea that that's what I was called being grown up. So there must be something like still on me energetically that speaks of Jen, because people often call me Jen. Um,
could be
I live in Ojai, California right now, which is a small town about an hour and a half north of you in LA.
great town.
Um, but I grew up in Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. And my mom was a nurse and she worked nights for most of her life. And my dad, I honestly just had to call him and ask him what he did for a living because I never really understood it. He said, and it took him a few minutes to explain it to me too, so I'm not entirely sure that he knows. But he worked for the IT subsidiary of a bank. But growing up, we always just joked that since we lived outside of DC, that he was probably some like CIA spy, and he couldn't really tell us what he did. So maybe one day I'll find that out.
Maybe he is. You kind of remind me when they ask the kids in kindergarten or grade one, what do your parents do? And I remember my youngest son says, "Well, my dad's on the phone talking to people, I think,
Right?
and stuff like that."
Exactly.
They
Yeah.
really hit at home what we do because they see exactly what we do and stuff like that. So it's so funny that you have to ask your dad now what he does. He probably is a CIA operative. So,
Probably. Probably.
so speaking of that type of thing, what were you like as a kid or a teenager? Did you, and I know they'll love this entree, did you like your stuffed animals? Did you do dance, music? So what did you do?
Well, I should mention that I had an older brother as well, because that plays into the fact that I was a tomboy and I loved playing backyard football with my brother and all his friends. And I loved playing in the creek behind our house in the woods. But I was also a competitive gymnast from like the time I was middle of elementary school to freshman in high school. So I had this kind of dual life where when I was at gymnastics, it was really disciplined and competitive, and I was very self-driven. But then when I was home, I was like, playing roughhousing with the boys, or I loved alone time. Like I had a really rich inner world with feelings and emotions and thoughts, and I liked to write, and I would stay up all night reading. I was a total bookworm. So I think I loved anything that was outside, and I loved anything that let me play hard in my body, you know.
And you want to share the story about the stuffed animals now or later?
Oh, I'm like, how do you know that story? When I was really young, when I first started going to school, I would come home from school and I would sit on the floor in my bedroom and I would line up all my stuffed animals and I would teach them what I learned in school that day. So I would like get out the worksheet and have them, take them through it. So I was a teacher at heart from very young,
Any disciplinarian stuff that had to go on?
always. Yes.
Who was which stuffed animal?
Theodore in particular, my
Oh,
teddy bear.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
Did they talk back is the question.
That I'm not at liberty to say.
Okay, good. So speaking of teaching education, you got your, I gotta make sure I get this straight, your bachelor's in psychosocial health and human movement. Human movement kind of relates to, you know, the roughhousing and whatnot, I guess. I don't know. But William and Mary, what exactly is that?
Good question. This is one of those things where, of course, I took my husband's last name as my middle name because I've never done anything quite by the books here. Um, So psychosocial health and human movement was essentially, I started that degree in 1999. So this was studying the mind-body connection kind of before it was like a thing that was in the mainstream. But I had when I first got to college, I had gotten really into yoga and I had gotten really into rock climbing. So again, the themes of like being in my body, being in nature. And what I went into school as an English major. That's the writer teacher part of me. But what I discovered through yoga and rock climbing was how much it gave me a sense of myself, like being behind my own eyes and having a way to really work with self-awareness and work with my mental health. And I thought, this is incredible because coming from the world of gymnastics, that it was all about performance and all about pushing your body, to go into something that was more about connecting to yourself just totally lit me up. And I went to the dean and actually I went to the dean and asked to drop out of school
Oh, good.
because I was paying my way through school and I was like, I'm gonna be a yoga teacher. I don't need to go to college for that. And she was like, I think you're gonna regret that decision. And she gave me the challenge. She said that you can I'll give you 1 semester to design the major that the best yoga teacher in the world would need to have in order, to be educated for that. And if the board of deans approves it, you have to promise me you'll stay and graduate. And if the board of deans doesn't approve it, I promise you I'll sign your papers so you can leave. And they approved it.
Nice. Well, we'll get to influencers in a minute, in a little bit, and there's one right there.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
I know after wilderness guiding, which fits the mode here too, you earned your master's in transformative ed at
Yes.
Prescott.
Yeah.
Um, what intrigued you to take that path, and where did you think you were going?
Well, I got there because after I left William, so when I was at William and Mary, I was started teaching rock climbing and backpacking and yoga and all those things. When I graduated, I left Virginia and I moved to New Hampshire. I did more of the outdoor education and teaching yoga there. And then I moved west to Oregon and I got into working in wilderness therapy with adjudicated youth. And so I wasn't a therapist at the time, but I was one of the essentially the counselors that worked with them. And that experience and seeing how much these young people were transformed by being held in nature, because we weren't doing the work. Nature was doing the work, really. We were just keeping an eye so they wouldn't run away. Um, when when I did that, I got really interested in like how can I get more deeper into the spiritual aspects of this because there was the psychological aspect that was happening, but the spiritual aspect of what are these kids responding to out here? That interested me. So I found a book by Bill Plotkin, and he was someone who was guiding wilderness rites of passage. I found out where he studied, and I went there to train. It was called the School of Lost Borders. And when I was there, I was leading like wilderness rites of passage more for adults, and all of that just I wanted to go back to school and study what's going on in our bodies and our minds and behind that. And Prescott College is another place where they allow you, actually they require you to design your own major. And since I had already done that in undergraduate, there was no way I was going to go to a program where they kind of told me what to learn.
Sure.
So I got to go and say like I want to study what's happening in the mind body connection, and particularly what I ended up doing my master's thesis on was how to help people connect to their body enough to follow their own inner guidance. And my definition of service, in terms of being a leader who cares, is my definition of service was following your inner guidance. And that doesn't matter what it looks like. It matters that you're in resonance with what your spirit is, and you're doing that in the world.
Yeah, no, I love that. And we actually created our firm Fifth Element on the premise that leaders in their organizations and their people will always do better when they're doing good, and good comes in different ways. And based on what you're talking about there, you were an early leader in clearly understanding that even deeper than maybe most from your time, and then from your time coaching on self-awareness and development and the importance of nature, as you said, spirituality. How did these experiences go a little deeper on this? How did these experiences in education influence your own personal vision, your relationships, and possibly for as an inflection point leading to being, got to get this right, a somatic coach and experiential educator, which reminds me, 2 days ago, I met two somatic coaches. I hadn't met one before, at least they never told me they were, but I remember because of you. So how did these experiences um, get to that point?
Yeah, well, the thing that comes to mind as you're saying that is I was reflecting with a friend a couple weeks ago who's also a somatic coach. Um, and I was saying, I was kind of looking at the weird wandering trajectory that my education took, and then my early like in my 20s, what I was doing with wilderness guiding and teaching yoga and all that stuff. And I, looking back, I chose things that um, allowed me to be present in my body. Because, going back to my childhood, I was very tomboyish and strong in my body and like that. But I also was really shy, and I also was a really good girl. Like, I never got in trouble. I was a good student. I wanted people to like me. And so it was really easy for me to kind of be a chameleon or lose myself.
Hmm.
And yoga and the practice of yoga and like really being in my body, rock climbing as well, and then being in nature where I just feel like I just get to be me. Like, I'm just another part of this. Really informed this I don't know if it's a vision, but like a perspective or value that what I really want in my life is to feel like I'm inhabiting it. I want to feel like I'm embodied through it. And that's so I picked jobs where I felt like I do. Like, I could never be embodied in an office. And if I had gone into the corporate world, it would have eaten me up. But or it would have just turned me into somebody I wasn't. I think it would have been
Right.
too hard to stay with myself. And so then that's what I ended up doing. All the coaching that I do, all the education I do is really about helping people stay in their connected to themselves and their body so their insides match their outsides no matter what they're doing.
Which is the part I love, because going back to our premise that leaders in their organizations and their families and their life, well, you're helping, the good you're doing is helping them become better in that respect, so their organizations and their families and whatnot do better. It's a the service, that's the service you're providing, that's good for you and it's good for them at the same time. What we call omni wins, actually, for
Right, right.
everybody. Um,
Yeah, it's that sense of like integrity and resonance with your deepest self. And if you're moving from that space, everything else moves with integrity as well.
Nature is an amazing thing, huh? It doesn't really need us for much,
Well,
actually.
to not destroy it is what it needs
That's
us to.
what it doesn't need us for, but it doesn't need us for much. And slowly but surely, maybe we'll learn that. The other thing about our firm is we were launched on International Women's Day about 6 years ago, and everything we do is around diversity and inclusion, and not as keywords or whatever type of words, but as real stuff. Describe your journey as a woman slash tomboy, engaged with the business world we're talking about, engaged with entrepreneurs, social profits, as I call them, not nonprofits, social profits, and so on. How did you go about navigating and getting to this point where you're thriving? Since it's evolved for women, their interaction in those worlds.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough question for me because I feel like my career path has been fairly solitary. And that's maybe a weird way to describe it, but because it's been so directly linked to my inner work,
Hmm.
that's where I focus my like kind of the trajectory and everything I've learned along the way, and how that was a reflection of what I was working on internally, and evolving and understanding in my relationships. Um, and so I don't think of it in terms of like, what was it like as a woman in navigating that? And in part too, because I didn't have a traditional background, like because I didn't do what I would call like the Berenstein Bears job pick. Like, remember in the Berenstein Bears, it's always like, you're a nurse, you're a doctor, you're a teacher. Like, because I did something where I could never really describe to someone who's outside of my field, well, this is what I do. Um, and because I never went into a corporate job first, I felt like an outsider navigating working in the social sector, going into corporate worlds, and giving trainings and such. So my answer to your question is, I didn't identify so much as I'm a woman navigating this, as I identified as I'm an outsider navigating this. I'm like a hippie granola girl that's been out in the woods, and
With, by the way, great running shoes. Um, you know what you're telling me that I love is it's interesting. People who are shy, who are the people that find who they are early on by accident, sometimes even because they've had more time with themselves and get strong with themselves, still have to learn how to be out there. But maybe their mind, body, soul has been developed that they can not only be happy being alone, which is a great skill in itself, and as a result develop themselves stronger versus someone that's been out there the whole time, you know, you know, getting into the world the way the world wants them to be in there, type of thing. Does that make sense?
yeah, that there's a I don't know, what I hear in that is that there's a different, like, there's a more internal uh
You've almost become stronger without the world having a chance to mess it up yet as to who
yeah.
you.
But I would say my biggest challenge in what I would say like a quarter life crisis, my early to mid 20s, was like how to interface with the world then. Because I
Right.
felt so strong alone. And I felt so strong in the middle of nowhere. Like, I remember in my early 20s, I would go off for a few weeks at a time into the backcountry by myself. And I would I would run into women with their husbands who were 10 or 20, 30 years older than me, and be like, what are you doing out here by yourself? It's so unsafe. And I think, oh my God, this is where I'm safest. This is where I feel the most at home. So for me, learning how to be in the world and be in relationships, like, a huge part of the work I do now is healing all the wounds and the crap I didn't know how to do when I was in my 20s, because I was so much more confident alone, if that makes sense.
No, no, totally. I wonder which is harder, being alone at the beginning and strengthening who you are, and then bringing that to the world, or not be strong in your body and like
Right.
totally know who you are because you've been too busy being out there and social and all that, and have to bring in, that side. You know?
Right. I don't know which is harder, but I sense they are distinctly different though.
Yeah.
But as a somatic coach, and for those of you who don't know what that is, because I know many people don't, soma comes from the Greek word body. So somatic coaches work with people through body awareness and whatnot. And regardless of whether you're going from having more of a solid connection to yourself and then needing to open that to how do I relate to the world, or vice versa, to me the answer is being more and more anchored in your body, and having that, being able to have a reliable connection and communication with that first.
And interesting. You know what I find with men, and it's because of the way I guess men are trained, that first of all, they define who they are by their job a lot and their title. And that's again just training, I guess. And but one thing I've always found is they would tell me about, even if there was just one incident when they were 9 and their coach, let's say, put them out on the ice or the field during a critical moment, and they might not even remember if they scored or they didn't score anything, but they always remember, man, I must be good. The coach put me out there in the last minute of a critical time, and it sets the foundation for their confidence in their whole business. Blows me away that small moment does that. And I guess more and more women will probably get that as more and more women are working now, but it was different for women. Do you find that at all? That thread?
the thread that people can go back to, like one particular moment in their childhood where
Yeah,
they,
not even going back, it's there that gives them the confidence that that person believed me when I was 9 and did that
oh,
for me. And it's just like trauma is in your elbow and doesn't leave type of
right,
thing. It's a
right.
positive trauma almost.
Right, right. You know, I was just having this conversation last week because do you know the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron? I'm finally at 44 doing that. As someone identifies myself as a writer and a spiritual person, I can't believe it's taken me until now to do it. And one of the first chapter is about like who were the people who either, um, traumatized you around expressing yourself, or who were the ones who really lifted you up and encouraged you. And I think it was really interesting to see that, yes, for the people who had that one coach or that one teacher or that one parent that like
Right?
gave them that shining moment, it sticks. And it really does change how a person inhabits themselves and how they show up.
Yeah, I find it incredible. Um, they said the fourth industrial revolution is about technology, AI now, especially, virtual reality, all that stuff. But they also say the fifth is probably about humanity. And we concentrate a lot on how impact and talent and impact come together, a whole bunch. Share with us what I think are really your unique traits, your unique offerings, that yours truly puts out
Mhm.
there. And about 15 seconds as well as the impact you see it and you expect it to have on your clients.
Yeah. I love where the fifth element name comes from, because I didn't know that until recently, and I was like, oh, that's why we clicked like that when we met. Because just for those of you listening, Mark and I were happened to be seated next to one another at a conference, and
Women's conference.
women's conference.
Mhm.
Yeah, the report on the status of women and girls in California, and we totally hit it off. And now that I'm getting to know you more, I'm like, oh, this is why we hit it off. Um, because my work really is about being a human at work. And um, from back when I was first teaching yoga, and I wrote a book called Teaching People Not Poses, it was about how to be a human and an expert.
No, I love
Um,
that.
and it's just continued to evolve in that way, so that now the way that my work is mostly out there in the world is on online courses. So you mentioned yours truly, and you mentioned 15 seconds, and I would also add in LinkedIn Learning, because I have four courses, and I'm about to film the fifth one on Monday, which I'm really excited about. And I'll talk about yours truly first, because that's my flagship course. Like, that's the one that I created that really encapsulates all 20 some years of the work that I've done. And it's leveraging education around the nervous system and embodied self-awareness practices and psychoeducation to really help people to kind of untangle what was the conditioning you got around what it means to be a good person in the world and what it means to be a good person in a relationship. Because a lot of the time, our well-meaning caregivers did not give us the lessons that allow us to step into our fullness and be in the world, particularly in our work world, in a way where our insides match our outsides, where our emotions and our values come through in a way that is anchored in service and in leadership.
Mhm.
So yours truly is a comprehensive program that you can do on your own time. It's DIY, but there are group coaching calls where you can come and like practice the actual techniques and practices, because a lot of it comes down to, once you know how to regulate your nervous system, and once you know how to kind of frame some of the unhealthy conditioning you got, it really comes down to how do you speak to people, because the language of relating sounds a lot different than the language of performance or the language of selling, and most of us have
Absolutely.
never learned that language. So that's yours truly. And then 15 seconds,
You're gonna
um
do this in 15 seconds, right?
you're we'll see. Ready? 15 seconds is
Yeah.
a European-based online learning program for business learning, And I created a course for them about not overthinking, because that's the flip side of being in your body is overthinking. And I was able to teach this course because I am an absolute overthinker in recovery, which is part of why I do all this body stuff, so I can get out of here. Um, and then LinkedIn Learning, similar. It's a global B2B or global business learning platform. And all of my courses on there are about uh, human stuff, like being what you call high skills, right?
Right.
Um, the nervous system regulation, managing your emotions at work, because just because you're at work doesn't mean you stop having emotions. Authentic confidence, expressing your needs. And this next one that I'm doing next week is going to be a fast track course that's going to come out before the election. And it's about how to find and maintain energy and optimism when the world is bananas.
Boy, we need that. There should be like, you should get like a course before you get married. There should be a course before you apply for president. Something too. It's fascinating. I think those the two you just mentioned, yours truly, these things are brilliant because we do overthink stuff so much that it's good, not enough stuff gets done. And certainly we need some optimism and different way of thinking, in the world. I just did really quick a panel, virtual panel for UNGA in New York and it was called AI and Love Intelligence. And it was about training AI as you would train a baby to start thinking in good values, positive way. And a baby will grow up and they'll have some bad things happen and maybe say bad words too. But AI can grow up that way also and maybe come back with everything it comes back with in a different mindset of not harsh or hard or evil like we think it might do, but in a good way. It was pretty fascinating. Me
That
and
is fascinating.
four people that are AI experts, and I'm talking love intelligence and how it affects talent and everything. So what you're
Yeah.
saying is kind of right in there, and so I really appreciate that. They say in LA that we got to leave them wanting more so we can give them a sequel. So I have one more question here
Okay.
on this part. The world's been, crazy now, and then we've had the, COVID in 2020, and sometimes it feels like it was yesterday, sometimes like years ago, all at the same time. And now we're in 24, the end of 24 already. Hard to believe. Can you share with us what you're maybe most grateful for, and also what you're most hopeful for?
Well, it's probably well, not everybody's answer, a pretty hackneyed answer at this point, but what I'm grateful for is that we are out and about in the world reconnecting in person again, like where you and I met at that conference, to be able to sit in a room full of incredible people, um, because that's where real creativity starts to spark. And I feel like what I'm excited about is how much feels like it's coalescing, in the sense that um, COVID was a real reckoning around what's working and what isn't working in terms of our relationships with ourselves, our families, but also relationship with work. And so something that I'm really excited about is I haven't told this to anybody, Mark. Here you go.
Cool.
I'm working on a podcast with a colleague and someone I've respected for a really long time, and we are going to launch it in 2025. And it's going to be about the future of work, but in the sense of what does work mean to us on a spiritual level, right? Like as we're looking more towards AI in the future of work, coming back to what makes work uniquely human and uniquely spiritual, and about connection and service and leadership and all of that. So I'm excited that I'm going to get to interview a lot of really rad people who have had unique career paths that were very much about finding work that chased meaning, you know?
And we can have a lot to talk about on that one, future of
Yeah.
work and 100% humanity at work and all sorts of stuff like that. And it's awesome. So is that what you're most hopeful for? The podcast goes well?
No, I'm sorry. So I'm most hopeful for that in these coming years, like now that we've had this reckoning of COVID, thank you for coming back to that question, that we can find a future of work that has enough vitality to it to really be at a deeper, be more meaningful at a deeper level for individuals, but also for our world. Like, I think I think as AI becomes even more powerful, my hope is that so does this like very human, very spiritual, very like connected to the earth way of working comes back as well.
Yeah, I think you might have something there.
I
Hey,
hope
I'm
so.
grateful for our new friend. And the running shoes thing came from when I first met you, and you had cool running shoes that were silver, just so people know what I was talking about running
They
shoes.
were rose gold
Gold,
Converse.
gold, sorry, exactly.
You
And
you commented on my old school Converse that I was kicking Converse at the at this conference.
and I'm grateful and hopeful that you are a leader who cares and you're doing great work. And I think you're going to continue to make an impact. So thanks for that. And thanks for being on the series.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.